and that it's not Peter. Cross-referencing it to 1 Peter chapter 2, Peter didn't understand it to refer to him. He put himself in with all the rest of the little stones built up into the spiritual house, Jesus Christ being the chief cornerstone. Ephesians 2:20 says, we're built upon the foundation of the apostles and the prophets. Jesus Christ, the chief cornerstone. Quote Scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a cornerstone, a rock of offense. Whoever believes on him, not Peter, Christ, will not be ashamed. That Peter was a moving force, a chief apostle in the church, there's no doubt whatsoever. That his writings were authoritative and they were accepted as such. That he recommended Paul's writings as Scripture, even calling it Scripture, equating it with the Old Testament, is indicative of the fact that they agreed in their basic theology. Well, since they agreed in their basic theology, the facts fit the hypotheses that the whole structure of the New Testament and the first 5 centuries following that, historically, did not give any supreme role to the Bishop of Rome.
Okay, now I want you to go on and let's get into a definition of the keys. Okay, Father Pacwa has defined how the Roman Catholic Church sees the keys, and would you give another hypothesis for that?
Yes, the alternative to that is the parallel passage of Matthew 18, with which he is well acquainted also, and mentioned it before. Namely, that Christ was speaking to the disciples, not to Peter, and the apostles in general. And he said, if any two of you shall agree on anything on earth, it will have been done in heaven. It should bind on earth, bound in heaven. Mm-hmm. Now, the keys of the kingdom were the power to bind and loose. Peter had that power, but it wasn't Peter's power alone. Matthew 18 gives that power to you and to me to pray together that we might bind or loose. So I take that to be the alternative proposition.
Would you say that the binding and loosing is a declaratory power and not one of supremacy?
Yeah, I think it's a right to declare something by faith, and I think Peter had that right. But if he was really the supreme pontiff of the church, this is a very strong point, I think, then the disciples of the apostles, the men who went into the 2nd century, the great theologians of that time, would surely have recognized the primacy of Rome. And they didn't. Was really the supreme pontiff of the church. This is a very strong point, I think. Then the disciples of the apostles, the men who went into the 2nd century, the great theologians of that time, would surely have recognized the primacy of Rome. And they didn't.
Okay, Father Pacwa, would you respond to that hypothesis? Why do you think that the evidence of the New Testament does not fit that hypothesis?
First of all, you know that when Jesus is speaking in Matthew 18, he's not speaking to the crowds, but to the apostles.
Right.
And so that, you know, it's not just we who have that same authority, except in a derived sense, but the apostles and their successors, the bishops, along with the successor Peter, have that authority to make decisions that we don't. For instance, decisions like what goes into the New Testament. That was not made by the New Testament. It was made by the bishops. They chose which books were to be canonical. The lay people didn't do it, except in that secondary sense. The bishops were the ones who were the traditores, that is, the ones who carried on the tradition as to which books derived from Paul, Peter, James, and the others, and then finally in councils, and a series of councils, you know, decided which ones we now have the 27, and really it was not until Pope Damasus I, in giving authority to the councils of Carthage and Hippo, in the end of the 4th century, beginning of the 5th, so that we had the first time 27 books of the New Testament. Before that we have 22 books, so that the authority of the New Testament derives from these bishops and from the Pope, and that an authority which Protestants continue to accept as their own basic authority.
Okay, let's get a response.
There's a severe fallacy in the reasoning. Mm-hmm. In order to establish what you just said, you must assume that there is a papacy with the power to do that.
Yes.
Well, I deny the assumption.
Yes.
So for me,
so it's a fallacy only if I accept your assumption.
Right. Right. Just as it's a fallacy if I accept yours.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So the point.
So we're stuck.
Yes, we're stuck. We're stuck in one important area that I think we can get out of pretty quickly.
Yeah.
This is it. At Vatican I, which was the cornerstone of all the power of the contemporary papacy. We know that because it was then at Vatican I, which John just read, that the statement was clearly defined for the first time in history, that this was the position, okay? Now, when that was done, at Vatican I, on July 13th, 1870, an argument was raised on the floor, voted on by 18 bishops supporting it. And this was what was stated historically, if I may quote it. Well, venerable brethren, history raises its voice to assure us that popes have erred. You may protest against it or deny it as you please. I'll prove it. Pope Victor in 192 first approved of Montanism and then condemned it. Marcellinus was an idolater. He entered the temple of Vesta and offered incense to the goddess. You will say that it was an act of weakness, but I answer, a vicar of Jesus Christ dies rather than become an apostate. Liberius consented to the condemnation of Athanasius and made a profession of Arianism that he might be recalled from his exile and reinstated in the Holy See. Honorius adhered to monolithism. Father Gregory has proved that to demonstration. Gregory I calls anyone Antichrist who takes the name universal bishop, and Boniface III made the patricide Emperor Phocas confer the title upon him. Paschal II and Eugenius III authorized dueling. Julius II and Pius IV forbid it. Eugenius IV approved the Council of Basel and the reinstitution of the chalice of the Church of Bohemia. Pius II revoked the concession. Hadrian II declared civil marriages to be valid. Pius VII condemned them. Sixtus V published an edition of the Bible and by a bull recommended it to be read. Pius VII condemned the reading of it. Clement XIV abolished the order of the Jesuits. That's you.
He died.
Universal Church, bye-bye, okay? You're out. Permitted by Paul III and Pius VII, put you boys back in business. Pope Vigilius purchased the papacy from Belisarius, lieutenant to the Emperor of Justinian. Eugenius III, number 4 in the original, imitated Vigilius. Bernard, St. Bernard, the bright star of the Reformation, says, quote, can you show me in this great city of Rome anyone who would receive you as Pope if they had not received gold or silver for it? Close quote.
Sure.
Let me finish this statement. It's important. You know the history of Formosa is too well for me to add to it. But you will tell me these are fables, not history. Fables. Go, Monsignori, to the Vatican Library and read Platina, the historian of the papacy, and the Annals of Baronius. These are facts which, for the honor of the Holy See, we would wish to ignore. Cardinal Baronius, speaking of the papal court, said, what did the Roman Church appear in those days? How infamous. Only an all-powerful courtesans governing in Rome. It was they who gave, exchanged, and took bishoprics, and horrible to relate, got their lovers, the false popes, put on the thrones of St. Peter.
Okay, we got to call an end to it here, Walter. We need a statement for Father Pacwa here. What do you have to say concerning these things?
Well,
this is by an archbishop, not me.
I know, and we don't deny it at all. You know, again, that's the basis on which Dante said some of these folks are going to be in hell. So infallibility does not mean justification.
No. What I hear you saying is that all the statements that the popes made that are proven wrong, they're not infallible.
Right.
And they
don't meet the 3 criteria for infallibility.
And the fact is that in spite of the fact that Peter is supposed to be supreme, not just in the fact of what he said, but supposedly recognized as such, the head of the church, the leader. When he speaks, there ought to be some respect and listening, okay? And you would expect that he would be leading in some other areas as well. We still have yet to